Well, put on your rubber alien mask and slap an Area 51 sticker on your bedroom door. This is Filmshake. I'm Jordan.
And this is Nick.
And welcome back to the 90s Movies Podcast. This is episode 63. We're covering the X-Files, Fight the Future from 1998. How'd you like my intro there, Nick? Did that summon any memories for you, or do you have something more X-Files specific you'd like to throw in there?
No, I think it's great. You are not an X-Files fan, not that you're anti-X-Files. I don't think you've seen a single episode of the show, and you hadn't seen this movie. And I've seen every episode of the show 3 or 4 times, and this movie at least 20 times. So I feel like you got the flavor just fine for a non-fan. You did great.
Okay, all right.
You know what? You could have said anything. I missed you, buddy. I didn't have you for the last episode.
I know. I was so bummed not being here for Hot Shots Part 2. I was glad to hear Doug fill in for me or for you, and you fill in for me. However that worked out, I'm still not sure. But needless to say, I felt like I should have been here to defend the younger brother sensibilities of Hot Shots Part 2, which I guess Doug didn't jive with so much. But I watched it, just for fun as I listened along to y'all talking about it, and I think I enjoyed it probably more than either of y'all did. But at the same time, yeah, there was some gags that didn't quite land as well. Not everything is aged super great in that movie, but still, I'm still glad I watched it. It was a fun time.
Well, wait, back. What was your final score for Hot Shots Part 2?
I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5, 3 out of 5, something like that.
Okay, all right. That's, on my Superior 10 scale, I did give it a 7, which is the equivalent, which is great, because I told Doug when we started that episode, he had to be me, and I had to be you. And then that's what happened. He was a huge hater. He was being really negative toward the movie. It just wasn't doing it for him. It was like my spirit had inhabited his body. And meanwhile, I'm just trying to sell him so hard on the movie that I am just really, really enjoying. And it was like you were there, but you were me, and he was me.
I did enjoy your enthusiasm that you were trying to sell him on it. You were definitely the believer in that situation. Maybe that was just Doug's problem. He just didn't have the faith. He didn't have the belief. Much like, our dichotomy between Mulder and Scully here. I wanted to ask you right off the top, do you think you're more of a Mulder or more of a Scully? Are you a believer or are you a skeptic?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I feel in a way like I'm both, and something that the show gets into, and you only get hints of it in the movie, is that Mulder is the believer, right? He wants to believe in everything. He believes in aliens. He had this traumatic experience with his sister getting abducted when he's a kid. And Scully is the skeptic, right? She's the scientist. But she's also the religious one of the two, which is why she has the cross throughout the show, and it's a symbol throughout the show, and it means several different things, sometimes just completely literal throughout the show. So I feel like both. I feel like there's a huge metaphor for how the two of them work together and meet in the middle about halfway through this movie. I feel like I take a bit from both. What about you?
Are you, well, before we get into me, just side question. All right, sounds like you're a little bit of a believer, a little bit of a skeptic, but are you a believer, or should we not bring that into this?
Wait, what?
A believer,
Oh, you mean like Justin Bieber?
Okay.
All right. Moving on quickly from Justin Bieber.
Completely. Well, no, I want to answer your question. I feel like, at least in the context of approaching this movie and the show, which I know nothing about, I feel like you are the X-Files believer. You're the Mulder to my Scully. I'm the skeptic coming in from the outside, analyzing things, trying to be objective. I feel like maybe your nostalgia and your love for this show that goes so far back is going to prevent you from being able to be objective at all. Would you say that's fair? Is that a fight that you have to fight your past as you watch Fight the Future?
Here's a question for you, Jordan. You mentioned the word nostalgia. Is it nostalgia if you always loved something, if you never left that thing, if that thing has always been a constant in your life? Then would you say that the love you once had for it is nostalgia if it's still equal to the love that you currently have for it, Jordan?
Yeah, I'd still call that nostalgia because you're still looking back fondly. You know, even if you like never stopped looking at that thing, at some point you're still grown into a different time now where you're looking back on like maybe when you first discovered it, or, you know, there's different like journeys that you take with media. Like like we referenced in our Blast from the Past episode, I'm a big Everclear fan. I've never stopped listening to Everclear, but I can also like look back nostalgically buying their CDs at Circuit City 20 years ago or whatever. So I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like you've opened up a philosophical wormhole, Jordan.
Oh, no, not already.
For instance...
Do you have a nihilistic rant for this episode?
I have no nihilistic rant. I can't attach nihilism to this at all. But Now you've got me thinking, Jordan. You've got me thinking way too hard. Because what about 2 weeks from now, when I'm thinking about this episode, perhaps I will think of it fondly. Would that then be nostalgia for the X-Files? Would I have to relate not only my nostalgia from 1998 when I saw this movie twice, wait, let me do the badass voice for the movie, we're talking about 1998's X-Files Fight the Future. Okay, good. That's out of the way. Had to do that.
I mean, yeah, you might have nostalgia for this very recording in a few weeks where you're like, oh, I feel sentimental longing or wistful affection for that past moment I had with Jordan recording. So yeah, let's not go down that rabbit hole too far, I guess.
Yes, and then I mispronounced missaid the name of the movie that I love so much that I've seen 20 plus times. I should have said The X-Files Fight the Future. I forgot the. I'm ashamed.
As we're mentioning the title, it seems like there's some debate out there if this should actually be considered the subtitle for the film, Fight the Future, or that was just like a tagline that was on posters that got then turned into a subtitle by fans. Is it just The X-Files, the movie? Like, that to me makes it sound more important than like, oh, this is just The X-Files Fight the Future, this kind of extended episode, you know, movie-length episode. I don't know. Sometimes when I see subtitles like this, for whatever reason, it just makes it feel like less of an important property. Do you have the same feeling or no?
Technically, it is just The X-Files, but for someone who was a huge fan of the show coming into the movie, I called it Fight the Future because I had to distinguish it between the show. Because watching the show and watching the movie are two different experiences. I think that's why I don't think fans were just stupid and were like, let's say it on that there poster. X-Files fans are usually pretty smart people.
Yeah.
I'll include myself in that group. I'm fairly intelligent. So it was more to just distinguish it, especially for the fandom. You know, if I'm in the message board, I'm going to be calling it Fight the Future, or the movie, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the DVD I got from the library says The X-Files Fight the Future on the spine of the case, so I guess that's just moot point at this stage. So yeah, that makes sense.
It's moot.
It is a weird thing that this is a movie for a TV show. We don't get a whole lot of those anymore, and a lot of them that I come to mind would be like movies that are like extensions of after a show has already wrapped, and then they, you know, want to milk it for some more money or something, where they just add on to the story. This is kind of unique in that it's a bridge between season 5 and season 6, where the creators had to think of a way to make it accessible to newbies, but also build in like all this mythology from the first 5 seasons, do something new, and then also like leave it open to connect to the next season of the show. And as a newcomer to this, just being dropped right in, I definitely have to give my applause to all the creators here. I felt like for the most part, they did a pretty standout job balancing all those things.
That's good to hear, man. That was my main concern coming into this, knowing that you didn't have any experience with the show, because for me, this is one of my favorite things that exists. If you want to get down to like minutia, obviously, I remember everything, right? This is a through line through the show is my memory, but there are certain things that I've hyper-focused on, where with the X-Files, there was a point in time, I don't know if I could do it now because I haven't tried in a long time, I could give you every episode of the show chronologically, like the titles of the episode, the number of the episode in the season. This was such a huge part of my life in the 90s and onward from there. It was just a phenomenon for me. It just came at the perfect time in my life. Right when the show came out, it was billed as being really scary in the early 90s. So I was afraid, my mom is probably not going to be cool with me watching this. But one time I was in Grand Isle. It was early season 2 with my Uncle Steve. And my Uncle Steve loves sci-fi, and to this day, he's always said this. He wishes the aliens would come and take him away and relieve him of the pain of living in this world. And I'm with him, man. I'll let the aliens take me away too, but not the ones in this movie. They're assholes. Like, different aliens. I watched it with him, and it was everything that I wanted it to be, everything that it seemed like it would be in the commercials. And then I started kind of sneaking it in at the house, like, maybe my mom will think David Duchovny's cute, and that'll, like, be my in. Like, she'll just say, like, oh, that guy on that show's cute, it'll be okay. And somehow it worked, Jordan. Somehow I never got any flack from her for watching this show. And,
nice.
Man, I got on the message boards. I was talking to adults. My name was MF Luder on the chat board. One time, someone said, hey, we're having a great conversation. Do you want to take it to a private chat so it's easier for us to talk? Jordan, it was a 31-year-old woman, and I had to tell her, I'm actually 16 and in the 10th grade. And then she felt awkward. That was my life, Jordan.
And then she was like, well, I mean, it's just the internet. You want to keep going with this?
Her handle was Detour. I still remember it, named after an episode of the show.
I feel like that's just, a rite of passage for a young male in the 90s growing up with early internet chat rooms, just like finding yourself in an awkward private chat, maybe doing something nefarious.
And this is the old internet with no social media. Yeah, man. So building up to this movie, I was so psyched. I mean, this was like my thing was going to be on the big screen. I mean, the only thing that I cared about as much as this was like the Star Wars expanded universe, like George Lucas's Star Wars. So it was that and X-Files. So I was so pumped for this, man.
Yeah, I didn't watch this show growing up. I was definitely aware of it and caught bits and pieces of it on TV, but I don't know, for whatever reason, it just didn't jive with me. But I did watch The Simpsons a lot growing up, and for whatever reason, it feels like X-Files were featured in parody a lot on The Simpsons. And I can remember a specific episode of Homer being tracked in the woods or something, and then Mulder and Scully showing up, and, like the UFO light, and like them trying to abduct him or something, some craziness going on like that. So I remember I also had like these Simpsons books and Beavis and Butthead books too. I can't remember if they did this specifically for Beavis and Butthead, but all the paraphernalia for like any of those cartoon shows in the 90s, I felt like aliens were just a big thing in the 90s too. And I don't know if it was maybe because of this show popularizing like the idea of aliens and like the truth is out there and that kind of stuff. And of course you had Area 51, which I brought up earlier. I remember I had an Area 51 shirt, and I did have a rubber alien mask that I wore for Halloween one year in the 90s. So it just felt like aliens were a pop cultural thing. Like you had those alien stickers and like alien with the green like triangle-ish head and the big black eyes. Like I just felt like aliens were all over the place, like all over pop culture, on shirts, on posters, on Zip. I think I had a Zippo with an alien head on it. I don't know. It just felt like aliens were everywhere, but this was the one alien thing that I just never got into for some reason.
Yeah, aliens were big then. It's all about the zeitgeist, man, and it's awesome that this is our 63rd episode. I'll get to why in a second. Yeah, this show came at a time of relative peace in America. The 90s, outside of the Persian Gulf War at the start of the decade, it was a pretty peaceful decade. we didn't really have as much to worry about as we had in previous decades. The Cold War was over, Vietnam was over, Korean War was over, World War II was over. Everything was pretty peaceful, and that kind of gives you time to worry about things that are fun. So thinking, oh, what if the government is keeping an alien conspiracy from us? That's a fun thing to think about. And even the bad things you're thinking about government cover-ups like the 1963 JFK assassination. You know, who killed JFK? That was 30 plus years ago during the X-Files run. So I feel like aliens were like a good, safe thing to obsess about and have fun with. And that's why the show could really only exist in the zeitgeist then, because really, you know, no show can really go past 9 seasons and still be good. But 9/11 definitively killed this show, because the whole thing with the government covering up aliens, you know, the dude from Blink-182, he's continued Mulder's quest with some success. Tom from Blink-182 and his alien, I don't know if it's a foundation or what, but he's got the government to release some UFO things. That's a side tangent.
This dude from Blink-182.
Right. Yes.
I did not know this.
Yes.
I was a big Blink-182 fan, as you know, but I did not realize he had any connection. Tom DeLonge from Blink-182 had any connection with aliens.
Aliens exist on Enema, the state, is like his mission statement. That he has pretty faithfully followed. He hasn't really been able to stay in Blink-182 with regularity since then, but he's followed the alien thing, man.
Nice.
All that to say, it's fun to think that the government is keeping things about aliens, but post 9/11, it's not so fun. Basically, the presidential administration throughout the 2000s, you're thinking like, weapons of mass destruction, they're covering that up. That's no fun in the Bush administration. Then you get to Obama and a secret drone program. That's not as fun as aliens either. It's just not anymore. It's not a good time. And they're talking about reviving the X-Files now. I don't think you can do it. And that was lightning in a bottle. It was the fabric of the 90s right there, as much as anything could be a part of the fabric of the 90s. So, yeah, man, I think that was a thing that we could really enjoy. Aliens on your Trapper Keeper, aliens on Simpsons, like you said, on Beavis and Butthead. And, of course, constantly on the X-Files, man. So I'm with you. I agree.
Well, yeah, let's jump into the plot here. Do you feel like we need extraneous information like set up from the TV show to understand anything?
I could do this so fast. So Fox Mulder, his sister was abducted, he thinks, by aliens when he was a child, and he has gone on to obsess over that and try to get to the bottom of things. He's obsessed with the truth, and he is a believer. He wants to believe. It's the tagline of the show. He is in the FBI, and he is investigating these files that are called the X-Files, and I won't get into the minutiae of why, but Dana Scully, who is going to be a medical doctor but has joined the FBI, gets put with him as his partner to debunk him, solely to debunk him, because she is a scientist and a skeptic. But instead, the two end up working together beautifully and go through all of this drama and these ups and downs through 5 incredible seasons of the show, the 5 best seasons of the show. It really never got better than those first 5 seasons. But something really bad happens. The cigarette smoking man, who is the villain of the show in a way, it's this guy that's part of this government conspiracy who's always smoking cigarettes. He burns the X-Files. At the same time, the FBI decides they're going to close the X-Files. And that's where we find our 2 agents at the beginning of this film. They have been assigned to other details, and the X-Files are closed. How was that?
That was great. And I feel like I got some of that from the movie itself, but you definitely filled in a few holes there too. So
sweet.
Good job.
Thank you. Well, being a total newcomer to this, were you surprised that the movie starts off in a snowy, mountainous area 35,000 years ago? Well, no, 37,000 years ago. It's 35,000 BC in North Texas. What'd you think about that?
I thought that was pretty cool. There's definitely scenes that really worked for me, and there was a few scenes that fell flat, but this opening was really great. I liked the snow, the realistic vibe, and I feel like even as we get into the present day stuff, it has a slicker style to it and a serious tone, which I imagine is probably an extension of the show's style. But I really like how this beginning sets up the movie to be a bit more grand, I know they were really pushing for something more expansive here with the movie, and you can really feel that, like, going all the way into prehistory in ancient Texas. These cavemen, and they go down in this cave, and they've got the torches, and they come across an alien. It's really well shot. I like the cinematography here, and then especially as you get down into the caves with the alien, the cavemen are being attacked and everything. It's really frenetic. It's really thrilling. You don't even really know these cavemen or these prehistoric men, but you're kind of rooting for them in a way because of this like nasty looking, creepy ass alien, which looks really wicked. I liked the production design on all this. I thought the production value was really sharp and everything looked great. So I was pretty much into this from the get-go. I liked this opening.
Right on. I love that you get like a classic X-Files like anachronism here where the scientific narrative says there weren't people in North America 35,000 years ago, but there's a decent contingent who think maybe there were people here. Maybe there were some things that we don't know that were going on, and the movie just does that right off the bat. Hey, you know what? You might say there was no one here 37,000 years ago, but hey, look, not only were there two Neanderthal-looking dudes here, there were aliens too. Love
Right.
that. By the way, dude, so that was almost all location in British Columbia on an ice sheet. Those caves, real. That was a real ice cave that could have collapsed and killed everyone at any point in time.
That's awesome.
And then, man, I'm with you. The practical effects on this alien. So the show, I mean, you get glimpses of aliens, glimpses of UFOs, but you don't just get an alien, and it's because there's an evolution of the plot here. You don't just get these psycho, intense, very nasty, very vicious aliens like this in the show, at least up until this point. They're so violent, man. The sound design for this movie, I feel like is really impressive. I watched this movie pretty much any way you could watch it, and several times with really good sound systems. This is an intense scene to open this film up with, man. I really dig it. And it looks great. This movie looks great.
Yeah, I was surprised too at, you were talking about the practical effects there. That's probably definitely what gives this scene its edge. And later on, there's some CGI, and I would say maybe it looks a little dodgy, but if you consider that this is from 98, it looks pretty dang good. So overall, I just felt like this was a really good looking movie. Even when they had to resort to some CGI, I was like, okay, well, that's passable at least. You know, I'm definitely going to give it a pass for being so old and being at a time when CGI wasn't as developed. But yeah, just overall the effects, especially the practical effects though, with like the aliens and the different like pods and all the goo and the slime and stuff, definitely dug all that. Definitely a 90s vibe that we enjoy here on Filmshake.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. And a lot of the crew for the show was still working on the show because they filmed a lot of this at the same time as season 5 of the show. So a lot of the regular people who worked on the show weren't able to work on this. And the cinematographer that they got is Ward Russell. He was the chief lighting technician or the cinematographer for most of Tony Scott's films.
Oh, okay.
And I think we both enjoy the look of Tony Scott's films.
For sure.
I feel like you really get that flash here. You get like this great late 90s look to me.
Yeah.
I need to say this too. Obviously, I'm biased because I love X-Files, but I can watch this movie objectively and say like, okay, I love this, but I can say if something really is objectively good. So I'm going to try to do that throughout. I don't know if anyone could argue that this movie doesn't look great. It looks pretty freaking good.
Right. I think it just looks pretty freaking great, yeah, in general. And that slick vibe, that makes a whole lot of sense knowing this was Tony Scott's DP. Because, yeah, it has that same vibe and that same kind of like, it's not gritty necessarily, but there is like a heightened realism and a slickness and kind of a grit and just like that blue tone that he brings to a lot of his films. So, yeah, all that definitely clicks and makes sense. Those two things go together.
Yeah, man, for sure. Even when you move into the future from 35,000 BC to present day in North Texas, I love the slickness there in the cut where this black oil, this weird, creepy thing, this blood that comes out of the alien. It goes in the caveman and seems to infect him, and he screams this really loud, creepy scream, and the camera pans up to the blackness of the roof of the cave, and then it bursts open, and a child from modern day in 1998 falls through. What did you think about that transition?
Yeah, I dug that. I dug the wide shots of the Texas suburbia in the background and these boys on their bikes looking down in this hole. And you've got the kid in there, played by Lucas Black. I love this actor.
Yes.
He's one of the evil kids in the movie The War, starring Elijah Wood and Kevin Costner. I just grew up really loving that movie, and he's one of just like the nasty Southern kids that he comes up against. And this kid has got like the most Southern accent ever. He's like, y'all, I'm down here in this hole. There's some black goo. Like the way he talks is so.
They ask him if they can have the skull, and he says, "No way, butt wipe." It's amazing.
Yeah, no, exactly. The way he says butt wipe is so 90s and so Southern. It was perfect. I was like, I love this kid. So glad to see him. But then, yeah, when the black alien goo stuff goes into his eyes, that was really creepy and kind of mysterious. So setting this all up, like, okay, now we have this alien presence, or I don't know, it reminds me of Spider-Man, like the black symbiote suit, like invading you, like the Venom suit or something. Yeah, thought all that was really cool, interesting tie-in to the Neanderthal people.
Yes, and shout out to Friday Night Lights movie. Shout out to Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, where Lucas Black just kills it. Great little actor, man. Love that guy.
Didn't realize he was in that. I've never seen any of the Fast and Furious movies except for the first one.
You should just watch the third one. It's disconnected from all the other movies outside of one tangential thing.
Just for Lucas Black.
Yeah, and Bow Wow. It's amazing. But again, like, I have to praise the technicality of this movie. You have the kids, and it seems like you're in a really rural area, but did you love the pan-up reveal to the city skyline in the background?
Yeah, I love that whole shot. It was good.
With Mark Snow's symphonic music, which I've listened to the score for this film probably 1 billion times. It came out 2 weeks before the movie was released, Jordan. So I bought it the day it came out when I was in high school, and then I listened to it nonstop and looked at the track titles and tried to imagine what the plot of the movie was. I miss the 90s.
You were really into this movie, into the show in general. I don't know if I've ever listened to a score 1 billion times like that. Like I know you're a big score guy. Yeah, I don't typically go and listen to like film scores. I enjoy soundtracks for sure. But yeah, you're definitely different in me that you would like listen to this score CD over and over and over. I don't think I've ever done that.
Yeah, man, I listened to it a ton. And Mark Snow is also the composer for the TV show, and he really shocked a lot of people because the music for the TV show is mostly synth-based and pretty minimalistic and creepy, not very bombastic, very effective, very good, but not this. And I don't even think Chris Carter, who created the show and wrote the movie, I don't think that he even knew that Mark Snow is capable of this. Everyone was kind of shocked, like, I guess we got to get a composer of the film for the film. And then he did this and blew everyone's mind. So I think it's a great score. And I love the way that it incorporates that classic X-Files whistle theme, which I know even if you didn't watch the X-Files, you had to have been familiar with that. It was ubiquitous in the 90s.
For sure. How about our introduction to Mulder and Scully? They are in Dallas investigating a bomb threat on a federal building. I guess you would know how to introduce this better than I, but yeah, it definitely seems like from the get-go with Mulder's character, he is trying to think out of the box, or he's like kind of going against the grain as far as he's like across the street having this hunch about this other building right across from where the bomb threat was. So what did you make of that, knowing his character from the first 5 seasons?
Well, first of all, I love that Terry O'Quinn, who is John Locke in Lost, and he actually played multiple different parts in multiple different X-Files episodes. There's a few actors who did that. But I love how he lands. He's a special agent in charge of the situation. And the introduction of Mulder is so perfect. Terry O'Quinn's character he is nefarious, and he's actually there to make sure that the bomb goes off. But the thing is, the bomb is in the other building where Mulder is, and I love him looking across the great expanse between the two buildings and just seeing a lone figure out on the roof, which is Mulder, which is a great setup for his character because he's spooky Mulder. He has always had these intuitions that have proved correct, which earned him that nickname. And his intuition here is right as well because the bomb is in that building. But yeah, you get great banter between him and Scully. They do a really nice, brief, kind of natural lead into, okay, here's what happened and who we are and why we're up on the top of this building. I don't know. Hopefully that caught you up pretty well on the situation, but it also pretty much gives you a picture of who the characters are too. So I dug all of that stuff.
Yeah, I had a pretty good idea of who these characters were, like just from the very beginning. I guess you saying that about him being spooky and having his intuitions like always proven right fills me in a little bit, because there was a part of me like, why do you think the bomb is in the other building across the street? Like, that just seems kind of random. And then when it is, it's a little happenstance. But if that jives just with his character and the general kind of mythology of his intuition and his experience throughout the rest of the show, then that makes a little bit more sense.
Right. Well, it was like a thing on the message boards. There'd always be people that were like, great, another episode where something crazy happens and then Mulder guesses exactly right what's going on and Scully is skeptical and says that can't be it. It must be a rational explanation. But then at the end, Mulder is right. And then to all of those people, 16-year-old me would be responding, why are you watching the show then? Like, this is the obvious formula of the show. If you don't like it, watch another show. That's what this show is.
I mean, I guess if you do that too many times, I could understand the complaint of just like, oh, well, like, it's just a little convenient for that to just always happen. But if it's explained that he has this intuition that's unexplainable, then that makes a lot more sense. I did really like, as we get introduced to the characters, he has this little speech while they're up on the building, and he says, if we fail to anticipate the unforeseen or expect the unexpected in a universe of infinite possibilities, we may find ourselves at the mercy of anyone or anything that cannot be programmed, categorized, or easily referenced. And that just seemed so true to me. I don't know, that just rang like really smart and true, and I liked his character from the get-go because of that. And I don't know, just thinking about even in today's world of like social media and ad campaigns and literally being programmed to, I don't know, yeah, you're at the mercy of like, if you just put everybody, like, and politically too, it's like, if you put everything in like a certain box and, you know, like you're just always expecting the expected and not looking outside of things and like analyzing things, then if someone does come along or something does come along and it's like, it can't be explained easily or categorized or, you know, easily referenced, then I don't know, I just felt like that clicks with like a view of the world that I have as well. It's just like, you just can't always fit things into black or white boxes, and having him say that and that tying into like the theme of his search and everything was pretty cool.
You quoting the words of Fox Mulder, my hero, that was nice. I enjoyed that. The thing about the show and the movie, really just X-Files in general, is it works in archetypes. So it's really completely apolitical. It's working in really large archetypes between truth and lies and believing and being a skeptic. So that really kind of sums up Mulder's abilities there. He's thinking outside the box, and life is usually outside the box, which is why he's right a lot of the time. And also, I mean, it's the X-Files. It's a show about the supernatural. It would be really boring if Scully was always right, or even right just even a marginal amount of times. Like, how disappointing would it be? It feels like, oh, it wasn't a man-bat this whole time. It was just some crazy guy. Oh, well, dang.
Right.
You know, like, that'd be a bummer. Right. Everyone would hate that. I would hate that, so.
Yeah. I guess so, in a way, because of the nature of that, like, expectation, you know, or you're going into this, obviously as an audience member, you're wanting those things to be true and those things to be real, that he's more the believer. So does that in a way make it more his show and more his movie in this case, where we do seem to follow him a bit more than we do follow Scully. Is that kind of typical?
No, actually it's not. In the show, Scully has some really major storylines that sometimes, I mean, there are several episodes where Mulder only has minutes of screen time and they're mostly focused on Scully. She has a pretty huge journey too. Even with her faith, there are some episodes solely focused on that. The movie probably does lean more into him just because it's going into the alien conspiracy, and the investigation of that is definitely more Mulder's deal. Yeah, and you mentioned black and white before too. I do think Mulder is kind of dichotomous with his views on that. So that would be more of a larger discussion, because I do feel like no, right or wrong, that's the only way it can be. I do feel like he has a little bit of that too, but yeah, that's a whole other thing. I don't know. I don't want to derail the episode any more than I'm going to continuously derail it. I guess we can get into the gnarly explosion where Mulder goes down to get a Coke from the machine down below, finds that the machine is not giving him his Coca-Cola, then finds that though the machine is lit up, it is not plugged in, then finds that the door to the vending machine room is locked behind him, then opens the Coke machine up to find out there's a giant bomb inside. What did you think about the sequence of events? Did you think it was really cool how they showed the machine not being plugged in? Because I remember going, whenever I watched it the first time in the theater. I saw it twice in the theater, by the way.
It did kind of lean into the convenient or happenstance for me watching it for the first time. Like, oh, he has this hunch, but then he goes to get a Coke, and then like, oh, of course, he would just kind of randomly find the bomb to kind of push the story forward. I did like that it was in a Coke machine, and that for whatever reason felt very 90s. I did like that he saw this creepy dude kind of leaving that area, and you as an audience member kind of know like something's up with that guy, and then he comes back later when Mulder gets shot in the face, and he's like the ambulance driver. So I liked how they set that character up here. But yeah, it did feel a little convenient. There's like, oh, just kind of like happened to find this Coke machine. That's where the bomb would be out of all the other places. It would just kind of fall right into his lap. But at the same time, he gets locked in, and then he can't get out. And there's kind of a thrill there where it's like, oh, like how's he going to get out? And they're like having to cut through the door, and the bomb's ticking down. So it is an exciting sequence very early on in the movie. And then, like you said, you have this really gnarly explosion where they get away, and then Chief Guy stays behind and makes sure the bomb goes off.
So Terry O'Quinn, John Locke from Lost, he says, you guys get out of here. I can handle this. They leave, but Mulder is like, wait, what do you mean you can handle this? So he immediately, again, his spooky senses are going off. Scully's like, no, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. There's no time. And then you cut back to what I think is still a really creepy shot of Terry O'Quinn, where he's just sitting in front of the bomb, just staring at it. Wasn't that cool?
Yeah.
Did you think that was cool?
It was definitely mysterious. I was like, wait, what is going on? He's not trying to dismantle the bomb. I'm like, is he thinking about what to do? And then he just lets the bomb go off. You're like, okay, I guess there was something more going on there, but it wasn't readily apparent. And then the next scene when they're like going before I guess it's like the FBI.
Well, wait, are you not going to give a huge description down to the most minute detail of the explosion itself, Jordan?
Okay, if you want to stop and do that. Yeah.
Jordan, they built a 40-foot tall model of this building and blew the crap out of it. They blew up so much stuff to get this one explosion, Jordan, because they just get in the car and start driving away right when it blows up. So you have a shot of the explosion right behind the cars. The car gets propelled forward and almost flipped over with them inside. You get the awesome shot of Terry O'Quinn getting blown up by the bomb. You get the building blowing up, the 40-foot tall model getting blown up. Then you get them getting out of the car and the awesome composite shot of them there's a lot of great camera movements, but the camera moving from there behind them to around them and showing the building blown to bits, which was awesome. Anyway, yeah, that was all great. I know you like explosions. I thought you were going to geek out on that, man. What did you like the explosion?
No, I did. That was very cool. Definitely reminiscent of the Oklahoma City bombing in the 90s. So 90s tie back there. Not cool real life thing, but in the movie, it is cool that it does look gnarly.
Yeah, it's an alien cover up, so it's all right.
It's an alien cover up. Yeah. I was gonna mention when they go before, I guess it's like the performance review board with the FBI, and they're basically being blamed for the explosion, blamed for like the loss of life here, which seemed a little weird because it's like, all right, but because of Mulder's intuition and knowing that the bomb might be over here and he stumbles upon it, everybody was evacuated, and there would have been a significant amount more loss of life if it hadn't been for Mulder and Scully. So that seemed to be, I don't know, I didn't know if that was like going to be revealed later more, like that's part of the cover up in some way, or if that was just like, oh, we have to make this feel more like tension and more like drama, and kind of twist the narrative here to make it look like our heroes are, not on the top of their game or something. So it's just like, that felt a little strange. What did you make of that?
I think it's a combination of the way that they're always getting screwed and getting blamed for things that aren't their fault, but also I think it was mainly because they broke protocol, because they were supposed to stay with Terry O'Quinn's character with the bomb to help him defuse it, and he told them to leave, and Mulder wanted to stay, but also Mulder is very protective of Scully, which you see to a huge degree in this film later on.
Yeah.
I think it was more that they broke protocol, and there's not, with a lot of 90s things, and oh man, Arlington Road from 99, the year after this, one day we're going to have to cover it, but that's a huge theme in that movie, is the way that people like to say it was the work of one person. You got to blame somebody. It has to be just one person's fault. So I think there's a bit of that there too.
They do kind of go into that where it's like the narrative that's being shaped here, and we have to shape it a certain way so that, somebody is to blame. And I do think, like you said, they do a good job of giving you the sense that Mulder and Scully are just getting screwed by the government, getting screwed by the different organizations, and, that they're just kind of on the receiving end of all the crap. So, yeah, I did feel that throughout the film. I thought they did a good job with that aspect.
Sweet. Also, I love that they were just in Texas and they were like cracking jokes about the Astrodome and stuff, even though they were in Dallas, because it made me think, hey, I was just in Houston. That's like right down the road. Mulder and Scully are right down the road from me, Jordan. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
They're my friends. My friends are nearby.
My buddies. And you also get their old boss whenever they were running the X-Files, Skinner, played by Mitch Pileggi, or Pileggi, I can never pronounce his name right, but that's par for the course. He's there making concerned faces and trying to help the two of them, which, man, he has such a huge backstory, but you don't really need it for this movie. He's just basically one of their concerned superiors. But Jordan, you go straight into something that's new and only in this film. Now that the X-Files have closed and Mulder is bummed out and trying to figure out what his reason and purpose for being is, he's got a dive bar. And I love how we cut to all the glasses on the table and the pan up to his face. And the cool dive bar that's playing the punk band X covering The Doors. And an awesome bartender who's really snarky. Jordan, what'd you think about this bar?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. Again, I guess this stood out to you more maybe because it was different from what you get to see in the show. They do go back to the bar quite often, and then not just the bar, but the alleyway behind the bar, and like multiple alleyways that are just like wet and greasy. And at one point, Mulder is pissing on a Independence Day poster because apparently the creator of X-Files hated Independence Day, so he wanted to have him piss all over it. So I thought that was fun.
This bar and this alley are like the late 90s aesthetic to me. It kind of reminds me of, really, since you have this cinematographer you have, it kind of reminds me of Fight Club, whenever they have their first fight, just the two of them, with the flickering light and street lamp, or whatever light was flickering, and the like gritty, grimy street. And there are rats everywhere, Jordan, including a rat makes a great appearance late in this film, running across this street. But
right.
I just love how that all looked and felt.
Yeah, it has kind of a true romance vibe to the bar too, which we talked about Tony Scott, that bar that Christian Slater is in at the beginning, like trying to pick up girls, talking about Elvis. Yeah, I could kind of see kind of this 90s vibe, this essence of the dive bar here as well. So yeah, I did think the alleys were pretty cool that they featured that so often.
He tries to go to the bathroom, and he can't get in there, and he's had like 6 trillion beers after his bartender told him that 86 is his lucky number, and he has to quit drinking. And I love how he says,
1 is the loneliest number.
Right. That was pretty great.
David Duchovny cool right there. But then he's approached by Martin Landau, who they got to do this movie. I love how Martin Landau just whips it out and comes and pees next to him. It's amazing.
Just peeing with one of the greats, man. Yeah, and I guess we should mention too, like all the witty dialogue. There's just like really sharp dialogue throughout here, back and forth between Landau and Duchovny in this scene, but of course with Scully and Mulder as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed all that. I thought it was really smart writing.
Yeah, there's some really natural callbacks that feel like they would actually happen. There's a joke there when they're on the roof earlier where Scully pretends like a door is locked and they're trapped on the roof, and it's not really locked. She says, "I saw the face you were making, you believe me." And then whenever he calls her from the room that he's stuck in with the bomb, and he says,
"Scully, you know that face I just showed you? I'm making it again."
Yeah, there's the when she does the thing with the door being locked, she's like, "Oh, I had you. I so had you." And then later in the film, we get a callback to that when he's saving her from the aliens. So I thought that was, again, I love it when movies just kind of sprinkle the same kind of idea throughout. They shift it into different scenes or different perspectives. I always dig that, the whole like rule of rule of repetition, I guess, where it's like you got to at least repeat the same thing like 2 more times throughout the movie and just like keep coming back to it.
Right. One thing that'll be pretty key, and this will kind of zoom us along in our recap too. The plot of this movie, for me, is really simple now, watching it and knowing the entire mythology of the show. It's funny, a lot of people said either it was not understandable or they're like, this doesn't really reveal anything. But the movie really kind of gives the gist of the entire show. And I want to see if you caught this. So the entire gist is just that a long time before humans were here, some aliens crash landed here. Those aliens were basically like a virus. They were very comparable to a virus. The planet got really cold during the Ice Age, and they were underground. They kind of mutated into this oil form. Meanwhile, the aliens, they've been visiting, the aliens of the same race have been visiting Earth, and they've made a deal with the shadowy government cable, however you say that word. I don't know how to say it. Hey, I'm from the country. I just read a lot. I don't hear people saying these words. They're saying things like, I need more pig feed. But anyway, this conspiracy is that they're going to help the aliens to colonize Earth by infecting everyone on Earth with this black oil, which this group of old men in the government think is just going to give the aliens mind control powers over everyone on Earth. And this black oil is featured throughout the show up to this point. But the gist of the film is that actually that's not what's going to happen. When people get infected with this black oil, they're going to become unconscious, and then an alien is going to grow within them, kind of like the alien from Aliens, and feed on all the nourishment and energy in their body, and then explode out of it and be a big, scary, mean, big-eyed, gray alien. And that's it. That's really the plot of the film. But the government, the group of old dudes, they've been working on this alien vaccine the whole time. So they're trying out their vaccine on basically the aliens' victims throughout this movie, like Lucas Black at the beginning when he gets infected with the oil. They're doing experiments on people, trying to see if they can come up with basically an antidote to being infected with the alien black blood. That's really what's going on. That's really the story of the X-Files in brief. I mean, there's a lot of other details. But did you get that at all watching this just once with no X-Files experience?
Yeah, I felt like all that was pretty well explained. I mean, there's questions within that of like, why are they okay with the aliens doing mind control, but they're not okay with the aliens basically just eating you and, like taking over your body and becoming its own thing. Like, isn't mind control and taking over your body just as bad? And then the whole vaccine or antidote thing was like, okay, so was this conspiracy syndicate planning to use this vaccine no matter what? Like, we're gonna fight off the aliens, with this? Or they just have that as like a contingency plan in case they get double crossed? Like, none of those are really like answers you really need to enjoy the show and the plot here. I felt like, just watching this once, most of that was like pretty well laid out. There were definitely like nods to characters, like you said, the cigarette smoking man, and then like later we meet the well manicured man, all these different like shadowy people where I feel like, okay, this is obviously nodding to somebody that has been introduced in the show that I don't know much about, but I get that they're just shadowy conspiracy dude doing evil stuff, and that's about all I need, I suppose. There were just like a lot of old white crusty men that were like at times hard to keep up with, like who was who and who all was doing what. In the end, I felt like I was pretty well rooted just coming back to Mulder and Scully, being really invested in their characters. So anytime we'd kind of go off into weird shadowy characters that I didn't know, it always came right back to David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. So it kept me in the story for sure.
That's good to hear. This is the point in the movie where you kind of bounce back and forth, where old man Martin Landau is like, hey, there were these bodies that were in the building that got blown up, and the entire explosion was just to cover up how those people really died. And those people are Lucas Black and the fireman who went down to save him that got infected with the black oil. The building was basically exploded to cover up their deaths and how they died, which is, that's the other thing that Mulder and Scully get blamed for, Jordan. I forgot to mention that. It's that they find these 5 bodies there that they attribute their death to the explosion, and they're like, why didn't you completely clear the building? Which they did. Right. They didn't know that these dead bodies were there because there was still a government office in this building. I feel like I'm going blah, blah, blah about plot. All that to say, Mulder and Scully have to split up. Scully is doing an autopsy on this body while Mulder's going back talking to Martin Landau again about all the stuff I just said. But then finally they meet back up again in North Texas. You have the old men, the crusty old white men, as you said, meeting together, conspiring about the fate of the world. But I love how the well-manicured man, it's this old, really proper British guy who we see has a large family that he's sort of the patriarch of. Whenever he gets called into this meeting, you just get that brief shot of him at his mansion in the British countryside. But
right,
they're all gung-ho about what's going on, and he's not. You can tell that he has his reservations about what's happening. So you get like him being on the outside, you get the shots of everyone else talking, and then the shot of just him standing by himself talking. They're saying, well, we got to kill Mulder now. He knows too much. He's doing too much. We finally got to kill him. He's been a pain in the ass the past 5 seasons of this show and through this movie. But one of them says you have to take away that which is most valuable to him, that which he cannot live without. And then you cut to Scully.
Yeah.
The desert skyline. I know that was a little heavy-handed, but I loved it.
Yeah, I did like it. I mean, it's heavy-handed for sure, but still, it's clear what they're talking about. You're indicating to the audience exactly what they're gonna end up trying to do. So, but that does bring into questions of like, okay, later she gets stung by the bee, and then they're like taking her. He calls the ambulance, and then they abduct her and everything. But it's like that obviously couldn't have been the plan, because you can't like plan for the bee to sting her unless, I don't know, they were somehow controlling the bee. I don't know if it's like, all right, like how are they going to go after Scully? Did they ever intentionally go after Scully? Anyway, yeah, they find this new playground where the caves were. Like they covered everything up literally with this astroturf and this clean looking playground. I did like the creepy vibe of that. And then they meet the kids on the bikes again. They like convince them to tell them what they saw and where to look and everything.
Do you like whenever the kids say, "Y'all don't look like FBI agents. Y'all look like door-to-door salesmen"? And then Mulder says, "Want to buy a badge?"
Nice. Yeah, I did like that. I didn't like so much the part where after that they are in the corn stalks and they go into like these dome structures and they're running from the bees and then they get chased by the black helicopters. Like I felt like there was potential there for just like a real big set piece and something to be revealed or something to be like, I don't know, really action packed, but it didn't feel dangerous enough. Like, oh no, the bees. It's kind of goofy how they're like running from the bees and then they have like their shirts over their head and then they run out and they're like, "Did you get stung?" Like, "No, I didn't get stung." I'm like, okay, well, that was a little anticlimactic. And then they get chased by these helicopters through the corn stalks and they're just kind of like running back and forth and he's yelling for Scully and stuff. And then the helicopters just disappear. And then the dramatic music's going and everything. All this like was supposed to feel dramatic, but I didn't really feel any like real danger. Like maybe if they were being shot at or something, that would have upped the stakes a little bit more, but it just kind of felt like the helicopters were messing with them and then they left and I was like, okay.
I think that I can help you a little bit here, Jordan. So first of all, this entire sequence after they talk to the kids is like X-File's catnip to me. They get on the road, they're driving through the desert as the sun is setting. You get this big, booming, bombastic version of the X-Files theme by Mark Snow. And then they get to this intersection and they can't decide whether to go left or right. Mulder says left and Scully right. Someone asked me to sum this show up in one sentence once, Jordan, and I said, the summation of the show is, the truth is the meeting ground of skeptic and believer. And that's what happens here, Jordan. He just drives, instead of going left or right, he just goes right down the middle, like where the two meet. And he drives through the desert, the sun sets, they come out to this crazy, creepy area in the middle of nowhere where these train tracks are, which again is like, that's my aesthetic. That's my favorite thing. Train tracks in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. is my jam. I mean, that's my favorite aesthetic that exists. So that's great. Then the train comes and they follow the train and they get to the domes. They climb up this hill. Again, the camera work, Jordan, when they're climbing down and they have the reveal of the domes and the corn. Did you think that looked cool?
Yeah, I agree. I dig like all the aesthetics that you just described and him driving straight into the gravel and like the 3 a.m. train track. Just basically that these kids sent him this way because of some tanker trucks. And they're just, I do like these moments where it feels so far-fetched and out there that they would follow like these little clues, but that they do end up leading to these very mysterious, interesting places. So I dig that whole vibe. And yeah, I dig that shot too, for sure.
And I hear you on this scene with the bees. I mean, I thought it was cool. I thought the visuals were really cool when the design of the inside of the dome and then the bees coming up and the sound design. They had 500,000 real bees there. And then they said apparently that somehow wasn't visually impressive enough. So they did put some CGI bees in there with the real bees.
Yeah.
And then they run out. Obviously, I watched all the Blu-ray extras for this. I watched all of the extras on my DVD back in the day. On one of the commentaries, one of the producers says that he wanted to be in solidarity with David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. He wanted to go out on the set and not wear any beekeeper type protection stuff because the actors couldn't do it, and neither one of them got stung, I guess because they were covering themselves up with their jackets like you were describing. But they stung the hell out of him. Everyone was making fun of him at the end of the day because he had stings all over him. But what happens here is, so the helicopters come just because there's been an alert that someone has broken in to the domes. So the helicopters come to chase them down. What I believe happens is, we already know that they're trying to find Martin Landau's character, that they think that he's the informant who's telling Mulder all this stuff. So I think whoever was flying the helicopters got a call that said, hey, it's this guy. We want to follow him back to his informant so we can catch the informant, which is what happens. So I think that's why the helicopters appear and chase him through the corn and then all of a sudden just disappear and suddenly they're just able to escape. It's because it's just like Star Wars, Jordan, when they let the Millennium Falcon go at the end of the movie before the big Death Star battle. It's because they were following them to Yavin Base and there was a tracker on the ship.
All right. I guess I'll buy it. So what's next?
I can tell you what's next, Jordan.
Okay,
I can tell you exactly what's next. They go to this hearing the next day. Scully's all worn out from all the crazy adventures she's just had, and the hearing isn't great. They decide they're going to reassign her, so she shows up at Mulder's apartment in the dead of night, telling him she's quitting the FBI. If you've been watching the show this whole time, this is especially emotional. Like, she's going to quit the FBI. The two of them are going to part. But there was this thing back in the day, this phrase that got started by X-Files fans called shipping. Shippers wanted Mulder and Scully to get together. And then you also had the non-shipper contingent that didn't want them to get together. So for shippers, this is great too. In the commentary, the director, who by the way is Rob Bowman, who did Airborne that we talked about last year. Love that movie.
Yes.
So they went around to movie theaters, and including the theater, was it the Chinese Grauman Theater in L.A.? They went to a sold-out show there where it had like 1,000 people because they just wanted to see people's reaction to this scene where Mulder and Scully have this huge heart-to-heart where Mulder's like, you've made me so much better, like my work would be nothing without you, and then they're going to kiss. They're finally going to kiss. They're finally going to act on this sexual tension that's been brewing for 5 years. Everyone's going, and then the bee that was hidden in her collar this whole time stings her. And then everyone goes, no! That was at the movie theater. Much to the director's joy.
Yeah, I'm sure. You can definitely tell like they're teasing the audience there and then pulling back on it just to mess with you. But that makes me wonder, were you a shipper or a non-shipper?
Man, I was on the fence. I was a non-shipper at first, but eventually maybe it was just because of my huge crush on Gillian Anderson, I eventually gave in, which I should note this too. So the director, Rob Bowman, on the commentary, he's with Chris Carter and a couple other people. So at one point they show Gillian Anderson in profile and he says, man, she has the most photogenic face I've ever filmed. And then like 20 minutes later, there's another close-up of her face and he goes, she's so beautiful. We talked earlier. I identify the most with Mulder. Definitely. I mean, I named my kid after him, so obviously I did.
Right.
But yeah, so I was like, I mean, I like her, so, and I identify with him, so they should just get together. So I think by the movie, I was probably a shipper, even though I was not early on.
I mean, even as a outsider coming into this, I felt like this was a really emotional scene. I really liked Dave Duchovny's acting here and his speech where he talks about, you saved me and I owe you everything and you owe me nothing, Scully. It was just like, oh dude, that's really powerful. That really gets me in my heartstrings. There's definitely, like you said, a lot of sexual tension there. They're just looking at each other. Anytime you have a shot where you have two faces on each side of the screen and they're just like slightly moving toward each other, like that's very slowly. It's just like you feel that tension. So there's a lot of that going here. Like we said, a little manipulative where you can tell, especially where they're like, oh, they're about to kiss and then they pull back on that. So like in a way that cheapens it a little where it's like, okay, it's the sleight of hand of the creator here. Like, oh, again, kind of conveniently being stung by the bee right when they're about to kiss and all that. So I don't know if I necessarily like that so much, but I did like the realism again of after she's stung by this bee and like it starts describing her symptoms right away. Like, oh, I'm having a strange taste in the back of my throat. And he thinks she's going to anaphylactic shock and him calling the ambulance. All that felt like very real in the moment. And then the twist of him getting her into the fake ambulance and then seeing the creepy dude behind the driver's wheel who shoots him in the face. Like all that was just super cinematic and really well done.
Right, because the syndicate were listening in, they heard the call, and I love the detail too that the reason that he survives is he really did call an ambulance. So as soon as the fake ambulance pulls off with him on the ground bleeding out, the real ambulance pulls up and takes him to the hospital. Where you get a cameo by the lone gunman, who I don't think you know because they're show characters.
Yeah, I kind of figured that as far as like some of those characters thrown in that didn't have any other purpose for being there other than maybe like a nod to the show. I do think that aspect of that other ambulance showing up and we're kind of looking at him on the ground, right? And we see the ambulance in the background kind of out of focus coming toward him like, oh, this is the real ambulance. I think that little bit is indicative of the writing here, and that I never felt like the writing was dumbing something down to me or over explaining things that didn't need to be explained, stuff like that, where it's like, oh, that was a fake ambulance and here's the real ambulance, or anything stupid like that. I just appreciated that it respected our intelligence as the audience.
It would be different now if they made this now. I feel like
exactly.
It would be different. Chris Carter, he had a period of time where he was just working well. I think it's kind of like with George Lucas. He sold Star Wars, and whenever George Lucas left, it's like, well, he's gone now. Blame Disney for all the problems. With X-Files, Chris Carter never left. So when something goes bad, it's like, he created it, and he's still doing it. So we have to blame him for what's going wrong. But he's really working. In the 90s, he could pretty much do no wrong because he made this show called Millennium 2 with Lance Henriksen that ruled. But the writing that he does here with Frank Spotnitz, really good, man, really good. And, you get these three guys, the lone gunmen. They're like conspiracy computer nerd dudes that were Mulder's buddies. They pop up in the show. One of them has a huge crush, Frohike. He has a huge crush on Scully, which is really great. They're just here basically so that Mulder can get out of the hospital. They help him bust out so he can meet back up with Martin Landau. But the reason that the ambulance driver felt so free to shoot Mulder now, whereas they were let go before, is because they've found Martin Landau and they don't need Mulder anymore. And Martin Landau has been killed, Jordan. He's dead.
He's come and gone.
Yeah.
I did like the car bomb explosion that we get shortly after this, where Mulder's brought in by the well-manicured man and explains all the alien history that we've kind of detailed and gives him the vaccine, and then kaboom.
Yes.
Nice fiery car explosion.
It's so awesome. And if you fetishize like 90s conspiracy late night aesthetic like I do, it's just so great with the creepy music playing as they're driving through DC, and you get shots of the Capitol building in the background as they drive by it. And then, man, that explosion is great. In the commentary, they were pointing out how proud they were that there's a bullet hole in the windshield from whenever well-manicured man shoots the driver of the car. And it makes it seem like he's going to shoot Mulder too, but he lets Mulder go. And like you said, gives him the vaccine and some coordinates. But when the car explodes, there's a shot of the car and there's smoke just trickling out of the bullet hole, which is just like a cool detail of continuity, which I liked. But also, dude, the big rat as Mulder's getting out of the car, and it's a real rat because they said there were rats all over the city streets of LA where they were filming these scenes. But also, obviously the well-manicured man is a rat. He's ratting out the syndicate, and this big rat runs across the street. Dug that, enjoyed that, like that more than the rat at the end of that Scorsese movie, The Departed. I thought that was a little heavy-handed. Here it's just in the background. I'm not saying this is a better movie than The Departed.
Right.
I don't really like that movie, but
yeah, I'm not a huge Departed fan.
But I love the rat here. Best performance by a rat in a movie, I feel like, is right there.
Notice the rat. He didn't have a pizza. He wasn't dragging a pizza, so, that was the only thing. But, this wasn't New York. This kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier with following these leads, these really far-fetched ideas of, okay, at this point, he's got this vaccine and these coordinates, and even in the car, he's questioning this guy like, oh, are you lying to me? Like, how can I trust you? He's obviously been enemies with this guy before. But then shortly after this, we just kind of cut to Antarctica, and here's Mulder like all the way in Antarctica with just like a piece of paper with the coordinates and the vaccine, and he's just tracking down where he can find Scully and these aliens. And I don't know, I like the aspect of that a lot, where it felt unrealistic in a way to where like a lot of other movies you would just, I don't know, they would show the process of getting there and maybe it being more normal. But here it just felt so like far-fetched and strange and like, okay, he's this lone guy just following these coordinates on this piece of paper all the way into Antarctica. Like something about that just felt really epic and ridiculous. And there's even a moment where he's like driving this snowplow machine or whatever, and then he's just like in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica and there's nothing around. So you're just like almost for a moment thinking, was I just fooled and I've gone to another continent in the middle of all this snow and there's nothing here? So I really liked that moment and that aspect of the plot.
Dude, I'm so glad that you like that, because the movie up to this point has definitely been larger than the show and more epic. But whenever you get the transition from the car on fire in the street alley to really just silence for a minute, and then this wide sweeping Antarctic landscape, and then the sound of the snowcat Mulder's driving slowly build up in the soundtrack, it's just so epic and so big and something that the show could not have done. And so surreal. The last 30 minutes of this movie are very surreal, in my opinion. It really goes in a place that the show just hasn't been able to go to. And I love the last 30 minutes, and I love that part too. I mean, it's crazy that he got to Antarctica in 48 hours. And there's another part about them leaving Antarctica that was a running gag with X-Files fans after of how they get back home. Could that be the next movie? But I love it, man. I love it. And you see this Antarctic base, which was all practical. It's on this ice sheet that they filmed at before. They just used that ice sheet as a location again. But two things. A, the little modest base on top, considering what's underneath. But also, the crew members were working out there and got stuck there in a storm overnight, and they had to hide out in the base set while there's giant blizzard was coming across that ice sheet, which probably was terrifying. I think that was probably pretty scary.
I'm sure. Well, yeah, you mentioned the practical effects here too, and then especially when we get down underground into the alien ship or the pods.
Right, and Mulder falls into it again, almost by accident.
Right. Which is, maybe another convenience of the plot, or he's just like I guess he's going to infiltrate this base somehow, but then he happens to just go right down into where he needs to find Scully.
They specifically did that because they've always made it a point, and David Duchovny has been heavy into this too, that he's not like James Bond, he's not an action hero.
Right.
So he kind of bumbles or by happenstance gets where he needs to go.
Yeah, I think there was even a moment where when he pulls out his flashlight, I'm like, shouldn't you also pull out a gun at this point? I don't know if he doesn't carry a gun typically or what.
He does.
Okay.
But he never pulls it in this film.
Yeah, and it just surprised me. Okay, you're somewhere where there's enemies, enemy conspiracy syndicate, and there's also aliens everywhere. So I'm like, wouldn't you want to protect yourself with more than a flashlight? But yeah, I dig the effects here and the production design, the makeup and everything is really cool, especially when he does find Scully and breaks open her pod and you've got the tube down her throat and you've got everything's just all gooey. Her eyes look all freaked out and she's got the veins on her face and stuff. I thought everything here looked really awesome.
Sweet. Yeah, I love the escalation. It almost reminds me of that Vince McMahon meme where someone says something and then something cooler and then something cooler and his eyes keep getting bigger until he's shooting lasers out of them.
Right.
Because at first he's just going through these little concrete tunnels, and then he goes into this hallway with pods like you said and all this mist and green icy green slime, and then eventually he gets down to where you again get one of these awesome shots where the camera is moving behind him to reveal how large the inside of the ship is. It's kind of Geiger-esque, but it doesn't feel like a ripoff of anything else, and it looks great. The matte paintings are great. The CGI, really good, man. Some of the CGI laid in this movie, I feel like in the last 5 years, I haven't really seen anything look that good, which is a bummer. I feel like some of this 90s CGI is kicking 2023 CGI's ass a little bit.
Yeah, like I said, I felt some of it being a little obvious or a little dodgy, but especially for late 90s, it looks pretty damn good. And you mentioned Geiger-esque. I I definitely got, like, obviously there's some alien vibes, but you're right. I'd say it does its own thing. There's a specific look and feel to it that does feel fresh and like I hadn't seen before.
Yes, and man, the extras, the Blu-ray or DVD extras, they go into the creature shop. And man, these aliens are so freaky. They did so much work on these in their anatomy. And I just love how Mulder finds Scully. First, he finds her cross, which I thought was great. That was awesome. And then he finds her, and he busts open her tank and drains the water out. And then he injects her with the vaccine, which basically awakens this monstrous ship. You find out they're in this humongous... Really, the end of this movie is kind of Lovecraftian because Mulder has no idea what the hell is going on or where he is. He doesn't even realize he's in this giant thing that he can't really even comprehend. And then, man, all the practical effects here. The ship starts coming to life. Everything starts shaking. Steam starts pouring out of everywhere. Aliens, which have been... Basically, it's people that have been infected, and the aliens were incubating inside of them and ready to bust out right before the people got frozen. Now they're starting to unfreeze, so the aliens are stirring to life and busting out of people's torsos and trying to break through the glass to get to Mulder and Scully. As Mulder's trying to revive Scully, who is naked, thankfully he brought a jacket for her so she doesn't have to run around Antarctica nude, but she's freezing and barely conscious, and he's carrying her around after he's already like traversed to this spaceship and done all this really physical stuff. So he's trying to get her out of there while all the aliens are busting out and starting to chase him, which again, for the show, like, this is huge. There's so much action. The production values are so high. Not that they aren't in the show, but not to this level. And the music's pumping. I thought all this stuff was pretty thrilling. Did you like it? It seems like you were into it.
Oh, I was super into it. Yeah, it was very thrilling. Just the time crunch of like, can I revive her? Can we get up into this shaft before these aliens pop out and get us? And then the hands of this alien crashing through the pod and grabbing his legs as he's trying to get up. All that was super thrilling. I thought really well done. Like you said, the production value is great. Thought the aliens were really cool looking. You didn't see too much of them, which, like you said, again, if this was made today, this would be different. We'd see way too much of the creatures, but I felt like the balance here was just right, where like I could get hints and an idea of the design and of the menace of these creatures, but there's definitely still some vagueness and some mystery left to the imagination. So I really enjoyed that.
Sweet. Yeah, they said on all the making of stuff that they wanted to go with the Jaws model, that less is more, but they still wanted to show you a good bit and for it to look good, but that less is more would be the best way to do it. And I feel like they show exactly as much as they should. And then again, with the practical effects, they do use some CGI here. They finally get out, just barely get out, after everyone else, including Cigarette Smoking Man and all his little soldiers there, have evacuated. And they get up to the ice, and then the ship starts lifting off, and it's under the ice, which means all the ice starts cracking and falling, and they're trying to run away from it. They don't quite make it. It looks like they're dead. And then all of a sudden, as the ship lifts up into view, they slide off of it safely onto the ice. I thought all that stuff still looked pretty damn good, man. And plus, it's the adrenaline of the scene, too. But what'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it all looked pretty damn good. Yeah, surprisingly so.
Yeah, and then the ship flies very slowly off into the clouds. I think, again, it looks great. You get this mournful trumpet sound as, again, Mulder saying, look, Scully, look, you got to believe me now. There's a giant freaking spaceship right here.
Yeah, and of course she's knocked out.
Which is great. They're laughing so hard on the commentary and how much pleasure it gave them to not have her see the ship. I have ice cracking sound effects like written over and over and over again in my notes. I must have really liked the sound effects on all these scenes.
Yeah, like you said, the sound design was really stunner. It was really good.
Sweet. Here's one of my last questions for you. Did you love how Mulder finally, the ship flies off, and like he has just gone so hard these last 30 minutes. He's physically exhausted himself, and he finally just passes out. And then Scully grabs him and rolls him up out of the snow and is like hugging and warming him. Did you find that to be like a really tender, powerful moment like I did?
I did. I thought that was a nice touch.
Oh man, this is making me so happy, Jordan.
Yeah, because like on the Hot Shots episode, you were teasing this episode like Jordan's gonna come in and he's gonna be angry and he's gonna be confused, and you're thinking I'm just gonna hate this movie. And I'm like, hey, actually, I'm kind of interested to go and watch some of the show now. If anything, I feel like this movie is made me more interested in watching X-Files.
Oh, dude, I could give you a top 5 that you could check out for sure, man. It's my favorite show of all time. I don't think it's the best show of all time, but it is definitely my favorite show of all time.
Well, I'm glad that we are able to connect with that in our 90s podcast here with this very idiosyncratic movie.
I was hedging my bets saying that you would probably be pissed off and confused all episode, but deep down I was thinking maybe he won't. Maybe he won't. Maybe the movie is good enough to where he will connect with it. So I'm so happy that happened. And we're at the end here. There's another hearing where they're like, Scully tries to recap to Blythe Danner, who is Gwyneth Paltrow's mother in real life, who's leading this committee. It says basically like, Scully, all the stuff you're saying is ridiculous and it's dumb. Like, why are you even telling us this and thinking it's something that we can report back to our superiors? It sounds ridiculous. And then Scully gives him the bee that stung her that the lone gunman collected. That was their other function in this movie, was to go to Mulder's apartment and grab this bee out of the hallway. And she puts it on the table and says, hey, I don't think that there's a department in the FBI right now that's qualified to investigate this. And then Blythe Danner looks at Skinner and it's unspoken. I guess we have to reopen the X-Files. Season 6 is coming in the fall, and we're back in business, Jordan.
All right. I feel like you just kind of opened that up for me or explained that look that they shared. And yeah, later on we get the note that the X-Files have been reopened. So that makes more sense.
I'm glad I could do that for you. And Mulder and Scully meet outside of the hearing. Mulder is really despondent, like nothing's going to get any better. And then Scully holds his hand and says she's going to stick with him and they're going to keep fighting. And then, yep, you get a shot of the desert. Hey, they're growing more corn out there. I didn't really get into the minutia of how they're basically getting the bees to pollinate this corn. They're trying to figure out ways to spread the virus better, which is what the whole deal with the corn was. But they're doing it out in the desert, out in Tatooine. Again, another Star Wars connection there.
There you go.
It's filmed where they filmed the Tatooine scenes in Tunisia. And yes, the Syndicate gets the news that the X-Files are going to be reopened and Mulder's going to be right back on their ass like he was before. Well, I was about to spoil something from the show, but just in case you ever do watch it, I won't spoil it. But anyway, yep, that's the end. Which I got to now ask you this, Jordan, and this is my last question. You mentioned this before. This is a callback to earlier in the episode where we're talking about the score and how you usually go more for the songs in a movie and less the musical score. And obviously, I think I've made it known, I'm the opposite. I want the film score. I don't really care about the songs most of the time, but not in this movie, Jordan. I love the score and the soundtrack with music that was done almost exclusively for this film. So the only music in the movie is that cool Crystal Ship Doors cover by the X in the bar. And then in the end credits, you get what I think is a really cool piece. I can't pronounce it. It's a famous city in Mexico. I think it's Teotihuacan, is how you say it, by Noel Gallagher from Oasis. It's this cool, like, electronic trip-hoppy piece. I really dig that.
I'll have to go back and check that out because I didn't listen to the end credits.
Oh, man, I love it. I love it. And then I know you're a fan of The Color and the Shape by the Foo Fighters, right? Don't you dig that album? Yeah. So the soundtrack album for this movie, it's 14 songs. 13 of them are specifically for this film. They basically sent out feelers. They had done one of these for the show, which is really cool and weird as hell. It is so weird, Jordan, but it's pretty good. So they did that again with this, and it's less weird than the one that they did early on for the show. But you have Foo Fighters. They come on after Noel Gallagher in the credits. They did a new version of Walking After You, which is really cool, which is from The Color and the Shape.
Yeah.
And man, again, like they're just nailing my aesthetic in the late 90s. Like I really love the Cardigans. My favorite period from them is from Gran Turismo from 1998. You have a song called Deuce from those recording sessions, which is really dark and cool. You got Bjork on here. Unfortunately, it's the only song not specifically done from the movie. It's Hunter, but it's from Homogenic, my favorite Bjork album from 1998.
I dig that song. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So much good stuff on here. There's a cover of the song One, like, One is the Loneliest Number, solely because Mulder referenced it in the film.
Yeah.
It's on the soundtrack. Filter recorded a version of it. So Filter, wow. Late 90s Filter, love that. You have a song from The Cure, Jordan. And then nice. My favorite thing on here, the Dust Brothers, who did the soundtrack for Fight Club, and that's their only album. They produced like some Beck, like Odelay, but that was all they did. But they did redo the X-Files theme for the soundtrack, which is awesome. So anyway, the X-Files, the album, one of my favorite, if not my favorite, song soundtracks.
Yeah, that sounds like a great compilation. Lots of awesome 90s aesthetic there for sure. Well, sir, what is your final score, your star rating?
I think I can be fairly objective here, but only to a point. This isn't a perfect movie. I mean, it is kind of confusing. There are some plot contrivances, what have you, but I love it. I think the production values are incredible. I think the acting is great. I think the writing is really sharp. I think it's aged very, very well, especially you think Agreed. Like a bridge between TV seasons for a 90s show movie, that was probably really dated. And it's not. I mean, if not for like the VHS tapes and novels in Martin Landau's character's office, it would be, if not for the aesthetic, just feeling such core of the 90s, it's really timeless to me. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even though it has a sharp late 90s aesthetic, it also, like you said, has aged really well and could feel very modern. Like there's just, I guess, again, with the writing and the way it's shot, like everything just looks really good, snappy. So I could totally see this coming out today and it being just welcome and right along with anything else that's being produced like for TV. Or I don't know if it's really even a complaint, but it definitely feels like an extensive, like expanded episode of a TV show in some aspects, but it goes so big and so grand at times that it kind of makes up for that. I think I'm right there with you. Did you give your score?
I don't think I did. My score is an 8 out of 10. I give this an 8. It's really one of my favorite 90s movies, to be honest with you. It's not like the best 90s movie, but I've watched it so much, and it's just a lot of my favorite stuff over the course of 2 hours. So, 8 out of 10 for me. What do you give it, bud?
Yeah, I'm close to that. Maybe not as high. I was giving it 3.5 out of 5, but I dig all the aesthetic, especially, even if I'm not up to speed on everything going on here with that ties back into the mythology of the show. I felt like they did a really great job. As a newbie, I could kind of jump right in and especially root for and care a whole lot about Dana Scully and Fox Mulder. So just for those two characters alone, just the great acting from those actors, and all the stuff we talked about with the aesthetic and the vibe, and all the gnarly practical effects with the aliens. I dig all that. It definitely kept my attention and was really thrilling in moments, even though there was a few like let down moments. Overall, I really enjoyed this.
That's good to hear. Do you have a connection between this and Hot Shots Part D?
I don't. Do you?
I think the best connection I can give is these are both 20th Century Fox movies. And I do believe that the first time I watched Hot Shots Part 2 was on the Fox network. So there you go. That's the network that X-Files aired on. I think that's why they named the main character Fox Mulder. Fox in the 90s crushed it, man. That was my favorite TV channel in the 90s.
Hey, there's a lot of helicopters in both movies. We'll just go with that.
That's true. That's true. Man, Fox Network. Simpsons, King of the Hill, Futurama, The X-Files, all on the same night, back to back to back to back. How incredible is that?
I guess, now that you mention the Fox network, that makes sense that Simpsons would have a lot of X-Files references.
Yeah, dude, they're not just sharing a network, they're sharing a night. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. We talked about a lot of awesome stuff. I guess that has to end now so that we can talk about 2008's The X-Files, I Want to Believe. All right, so I know you haven't seen this. The only X-Files thing that you've seen is the 1998 film. So I Want to Believe, Jordan, it's not the worst movie I've seen. It's just not very good. This came out the summer of 2008, the weekend after The Dark Knight. I had just gone the week before to the midnight showing of The Dark Knight. It was an experience of a lifetime. That's one of the great films of the 2000s. We just did a bonus episode on that where I've revealed that as one of my top 5. A lot of other big movies coming out that summer, pretty huge. And unfortunately, the X-Files, I want to believe, came out right after that. So it got squashed at the box office. The midnight showing was particularly sad. My wife and I went with my cousin Adrian and my brother Charlie. And so my wife always falls asleep during movies, right? I can't even imagine how we went to midnight movies and she stayed awake back then. But she fell asleep during the previews for X-Files, I Want to Believe. And I thought, holy crap, she is already asleep and the movie hasn't even started. But the crazy thing is, the previews ended and she woke up and she watched the whole movie with me. And Adrian and Charlie fell asleep early into the movie. So she and I think, are the only 2 people who have ever watched this, because there were only 2 other people in the theater. So I guess it was the 2 of us and the other 2 people. It only made like 10 million domestic or something opening weekend. It didn't do great. And it's just a really low-key movie, man. As much as the 1998 movie like tries to do it big, this movie is, even for the TV show, this would be like a really, really, really quiet episode. Like, it's barely even a supernatural story. The villain is just a doctor, like a mad scientist. Basically, the plot of the movie is just that this guy has been kidnapping all these women and taking their body parts because he's trying to basically give his lover, who is a male, a new body. So he's making a Frankenstein monster, which is kind of pseudoscience, just barely an X-File. The main X-File is that there's this priest who is a pedophile who has gone to prison and now lives in this community of recovering pedophiles. He's having visions about the killer and the women dying. And Mulder gets pulled out of retirement, according to the show. At this point, he's on the run from the FBI, which they're no longer chasing him. And the thing is, when this movie came out, no one knew what it was going to be about. Everyone is thinking, well, on the X-Files, in 2012, the aliens were supposed to invade Earth. That was supposed to be when they finally come and take over, right? Like the movie talked about. They just didn't give the year there. And the show doesn't resolve that. Like, Mulder and Scully don't stop the invasion. So coming into this movie, the thought is, oh man, this is going to be so epic. Like, we're going to get into the alien invasion maybe. And then Chris Carter said, no, this is going to be a standalone story. So then my thought is, holy crap, if he's not doing that and it's a standalone story, this standalone story must be amazing. This must be like something that's been in his head for years. That is going to be incredible. And it's not. It's not at all. It's just really quiet, low-key. It's a thematically difficult movie about faith and belief that just doesn't really do a great job exploring those things overall. It has its moments. If you like these 2 characters, they're together again. They're romantic now. They're living together. They're getting physical. But at the same time, like, Scully's a medical doctor now. Mulder is still eating sunflower seeds and throwing pencils at the ceiling, but just on a, like, in a room, like, just chilling, not doing anything until Exhibit comes. Exhibit's in this movie, Jordan. He and Amanda Peet are these 2 FBI agents who call Mulder in. They tell him, hey, the FBI will forgive you if you help us with this case, which he does. And it's really not that exciting. It's very quiet. It's very snowy. It's pretty much just all in a snowy, wintry, rural Virginia landscape.
I guess they liked all the snow from the first movie. They're like, we need more snow. We need to bring that back.
Well, it's like something that was exciting about it beforehand is that they filmed it in Vancouver, and the first 5 seasons of the show were filmed in Vancouver. And then after they did the film, they did everything in LA because I can't remember which out of Duchovny or Anderson. Maybe both of them wanted to be in LA. So this movie brings it back to Vancouver. So again, everyone's like, oh, it's going to be so epic. We're going to be back there. But it really is just like, it's snowing. It's freezing cold. The movie's very quiet. A few women get abducted. It's shown really early that they're just getting abducted by a dude. Nothing supernatural's going on there. The ending, someone gets hit on the back of the head with a shovel, basically, and that's the end. I don't have a lot of affection for this movie. I was hoping coming back to it, because I haven't watched it since the theater. I did buy the Blu-ray at Blockbuster for like $5 in like 2010. I thought, man, maybe this will be better now. Maybe it's just missing Rob Bowman's direction. I don't know. Chris Carter wrote and directed it. Frank Spotnitz helped him write it. Again, it's not very good, man. I don't know. It's a bummer. I don't want to go on about it too long. Yeah. So That's all I'll say about it. It's a disappointment. I think if you're an X-Files fan, you got to watch it because the character work with Mulder and Scully is still good. That's good. And their acting is still good. They're still engaging. It's still fun to watch the two of them. They're just not really surrounded by much here at all.
Well, that's definitely the draw for me going into this blind, is just wanting to see more of the character work between them. I think it is a really interesting dichotomy and dynamic, so at least it has that going for it without anything else. So
right. Yeah, that's it. That bumps it up to a 5 out of 10 for me because I just love them that much, and I like at least where they end up at the end of this movie. I do like story-wise, as far as just the two of them, not necessarily the story of the movie. So it's enough to do that. But I mean, you're better off just watching like an average episode of the show is better than this movie.
Gotcha. Well, with that said, we can move on to our trivia battle.
Hold it! Pop quiz, hotshot.
Oh, Jordan, so you missed last episode, and I did a special thing. That thing was called Does Doug Do What Jordan Don't, which is a play on Sega Does What Nintendo Don't. And he kind of did, Jordan. He kind of did. I asked him 4 questions that I had asked you and you had missed, some of them multiple times.
Just further shaming me on this podcast. Just want to tarnish my reputation at trivia even more.
Yes. Mocking you when you're not even here. And then I wrote one special question for him at the end. You're welcome. You're welcome. And you're welcome for this. So since you're coming back here, I'm going to do something special for you. So I will not be fielding any questions from you. I will take whatever punishment is coming toward me because you're picking the next episode. It's Jordan's pick. And you can pick the punishment, whatever you want, man. Anything you want, I guess I'll watch. But here's the deal. I'm giving you a third chance. We're going to play Does Jordan Do What Jordan Don't? I'm going to ask you the same 5 questions I asked Doug.
Oh, no.
Let's see if you can get 3 out of 5 right this time.
I mean, I just listened to this, so it'd be really sad if I don't get these right.
Really, you should get 5 out of 5. Shame on you if you don't get these all right.
Shame on me. And shame on our listeners for having to listen to these questions again.
The thing is, we're going to do a lightning round because this should not take long. This should be fast.
Okay,
so you need to be on your toes. You should know these.
All right, I'm waking up. I'm alive.
Here you go. For the 400th time, for the love of God, please know the answer to this, Jordan. 1998's The Water Boy. I'm not going to ask the question like I do before. Frank Karachi, you got it.
Frank Karachi directed The Water Boy.
All right, here we go. Who directed the 1986 cult classic The Boy Who Could Fly?
Nick Castle.
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay, that's 2 out of 2. Let's keep it going. All right. Catwoman, Jordan. Who directed Catwoman? Yes. Oh, my gosh. Ding, 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 ding. This is almost as good as the X-Files movie right here. This is giving me so much joy. Okay. All right. Who directed White Chicks, Jordan?
Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Yes, you got it. You weren't fooled
the
this
patriarch.
time. Yes. You did it. All right, here's the final question. Now, this one I've only asked Doug, but you said you just listened to it, so you should know it. Raging Bull cinematographer Michael Chapman worked on this Michael Cadden Jones directed comedy starring Michael J. Fox from 1991.
Doc Hollywood.
You got it. Yay. You're so smart.
I'm so smart. I just had to repeat the answers that you gave, Doug, for our last episode. That's all.
That's right.
That's all. I'm a genius.
Basically, your greatest strategy at winning trivia is to not show up.
There you go. And I get all the questions right. I'm amazing.
What are you sticking me with?
Because I've won. I've so valiantly won this battle, if you can call it that. All right, so my pick for next time. I've been wanting to do this movie for a while. We're coming up in the summer months. This feels like a hot, sweaty, action-packed movie that I just loved growing up. This is going to be 1995's Desperado, directed by Robert Rodriguez, Antonio Banderas, Salma Hayek, a little Tarantino cameo in here. Got our buddy Steve Buscemi. All right, so that's going to be the main pick. Now, what would you guess would be the punishment associated with this movie?
Is it another Rodriguez movie?
It is.
Oh, which one?
All right, so I know we're both not fans of movies that start with Once Upon a Time in their title, but I saw this movie in the theater. Big hopes for this movie for whatever reason, I guess because I loved Desperado so much, and it also has Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek. but it also includes Johnny Depp as a blind assassin. This is Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Have you ever seen this movie, Nick?
No.
Okay. I'm really like conflicted about punishing you with this because I just remember being so disappointed and hating this movie so much when I saw it. Now I'm just intrigued, since you've never seen this, that you'll have to watch Desperado, and it's somewhat of a sequel. This is Once Upon a Time in Mexico. If you've never seen El Mariachi, that would be the first film in the series. So you can just make it a triple bill if your heart so desires. I know you love extra punishment and doing extra homework for these things.
I'm not a huge Rodriguez fan, so I think I'll pass. I think I'll just watch two. Watch two.
There you go. All right. Well, enjoy that. Enjoy talking X-Files with you, where you got to geek out about one of your favorite things. So next time I'll probably geek out about one of my favorite 90s movies. Hopefully it lives up. I haven't seen it in many years, but this is definitely one. Had the VHS, watched it over and over again with my brother and with my friends. I'm a guitar player, so, just the fact that he has a guitar case filled with guns and there's a dude that has like a guitar case that shoots a rocket at some point always appealed to me. And then, of course, you have the ever beautiful Salma Hayek and the eternally sexy Antonio Banderas while you're at it. So hopefully we'll have a good time with this, and our listeners will too. All right, well, thanks everybody for listening. If you want to connect with us, you can find us on social media, especially at Twitter at 90s Movies Pod. You can email us at filmshakepodcast@gmail.com. And please write and review the show on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. We definitely appreciate your support there. And you can support us for sure with your dollars if you'd like and get bonus content. You can go to patreon.com/filmshake and sign up for at least $3 a month. You get a bonus episode from us every month and other cool stuff there. So appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you next time for more Film Shake.
Take it easy.
Whatever happened to playing a hunch, Scully? The element of surprise, random acts of unpredictability. If we fail to anticipate the unforeseen or expect the unexpected in a universe of infinite possibilities, we may find ourselves at the mercy of anyone or anything that cannot be programmed, categorized, or easily referenced. What are we doing up here, Scully? It's hotter than hell.